One with Dr. Kathy Chen, and you will hear how we might want to reimagine perfectionism.
Hi, Michelle. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Amazing. How are you? It's been some time.
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, been a little hectic and crazy, but you know, that's how summers are. And
And every season, all four?
I mean, every season, but I feel like especially summer. So, um, yeah,
We're like all weather tires, us moms, right? It's
yeah,
like we're good for the rain, we're good for the snow, and all of the above. But
right.
it's nice to see you, and I'm excited to be here. Let's rock and roll. This is
Sounds
about
great.
rockstar parenting, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, I'll just do a small intro and then we'll get into it.
Awesome.
Okay. Hi everyone. This is Michelle. I'm Michelle Vacanis, and I am the founder and executive director of the Colette Louise Tisdahl Foundation. We are a nonprofit with a mission to improve outcomes in pregnancy, through postpartum, and in prematurity and infancy, as well as aiding in the grief process for those of us who have lost a baby. And we do that through financial assistance, education, and advocacy. Our financial assistance program is always our most popular and what we're most known for. And we help families who are dealing with high risk or complicated pregnancies, NICU stays, or loss. And we are turning 6 in September, and we have helped over 2,500 families in all 50 states and given away over 1.5 million. So it's been really crazy. And one of the things that I really wanted to do this year was to grow more of our education piece, our awareness. And when I sat down and thought about it, I realized I knew all these parents who were doing amazing work. And I thought, let's highlight them. So we called it Rockstar Parents. It started off as Kick-Ass Parents, and then I decided maybe that was too much. And so we're doing Rockstar Parents, and I'm so excited to have Melissa with us. And Melissa is an amazing person, but is an author and a speaker, a podcast host. She does coaching, and that's actually how I met her. She was my coach for a while, and I would just love if you could introduce yourself a little bit.
Thank you, Michelle. Yes, I am so excited to be here. I think I would have been in this episode, whether it was like kick ass or kick butt parenting or rock star. Either way, I resonate because I think being a mother, it's like you have to be a chameleon. You have to be up for whatever is in front of your face.
Mhm.
And I think the work that you're doing is evident of that, right? It's something that was part of your own journey. And for me, my business has been part of my journey. I mean, I started about 13 years ago, which is not a coincidence. That's the age of my eldest son. And it's been a blast to add on to my coaching practice to mom founders that are visionary and have these huge missions on their hearts, but also to add podcasting. And so for me, that journey was, again, kind of like a diaper blowout in the sense that it was unexpected and not the best timing, but something that, I was able to launch in 2017. So the Mom Founder Imagination Hub is, my opportunity to give other people voices and help us figure this out together because there's so much loneliness involved in our motherhood journeys. And I think it's important for us to really just be really more honest about it. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, that is for sure. And I want to be sure that people feel heard and seen. So I appreciate this opportunity to just share kind of like what's on my heart and just, reconnect with you, Michelle. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I think you definitely say everything's true. I've always felt, and I think, we definitely did it in our coaching and talked about it is, that kind of idea is like, you're supposed to work like you don't have children. You're supposed to parent like you don't have to work.
Mm.
And, that's impossible, right? And we're balancing both and doing both. And I think that's the more important thing. And so I always love that you are, very cognizant, very aware, and sharing that as part of the issue is that, as moms, we're going to have to pivot and we're going to have to, change things as we go. And then we can still incorporate, both motherhood and work, together and really do this in the best way possible for us. So I really always appreciate that. So you mentioned your oldest is 13. Tell us a little bit about your parenting journey, maybe like that first, postpartum year. How was that? Tell us a little bit about that.
So I would say the journey that kind of revealed itself as a lot of us, you have this like grand plan and it's like, oh my God, it's going to be wonderful, totally perfectly laid out. And basically it just like, explodes or implodes in your face oftentimes with the realities that you're not in control of everything. Right. And so for me, when I first became a mom, I remember it was May 31st. And yeah, I have that day memorized because that was the day my plans changed when I became um, painfully aware that my childcare solution, quote unquote, at the time before giving birth to my firstborn, was no longer available to me. And I remember just rocking, I was my baby already born? Yeah, he was already born. He was like months in, right? And so you're emotionally, or at least I was emotionally wiling out. I don't have a better way to kind of put it. There's so much that happens, that first year. It's like you're reminded of maybe the lullabies that were sang to you, and all depending on the relationship that you have with your own mom and your own childhood, a lot bubbles up, especially if you have a past that is complicated, as mine has been, because I was born and raised to a mom that has manic depression. And so for me, a lot of those things were stirring. And so the moment where I found out that my childcare was no longer the case for me, my son was born on a May 4th, and May 31st was when I found that out. I just sat and I was in that rocking chair weeping, 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 weeping. I was like, oh my goodness, who am I going to be now? Because for me, trust was and still is a very big, big, big like issue, quote unquote, right? Um, can I trust someone with my child?
Right.
I just spent, 2 years earning my MBA before that. And so at least I was very, very privileged in the sense that I earned a full scholarship. So I didn't have, $150,000 of debt to be thinking about, but I did have pride. And I think, when you become a mom, it's not something that just disappears. You don't all of a sudden say to yourself, "Oh, I don't need to have anything going on for myself." Like it's not like you just become this like, um 100%, other person, right? You're still the person you were before you came to that moment of being a parent. And so for me, that's how my journey began. It began with, my plans just blowing up in my face basically, and having to decide, okay, well, if I can't trust someone with my firstborn, and again, I was very emotionally tender, would be the right way of describing it, is, does that mean that I have to almost throw my MBA in the trash? And I wrote that in an actual short story I wrote, Fast Fallen Women, last year. I actually wrote that, and I was so conflicted about that, because I was like, am I the only one that feels that way? But I gotta believe other people that are listening to this, and anyone that, has as an education and was raised in a way where it's like, oh, source of significance, and that's what matters, achievement. It's that conflict that gets you when you first become a mom. And so my firstborn is 13. That was 13 years ago. And I spent 6 months postpartum, by myself with this child, having him right by the sunlight because I think he had jaundice or something, and just praying that all the milestones would be met because obviously I didn't know anything.
Right.
And I was really scared. Like, there were moments I was like, what am I supposed to do with this child? I was so used to working in advertising and like dressing, fairly nicely, and having a boss and having a to-do and an organized schedule, kind of sort of, maybe in advertising in New York City. But, here I was with this child. And so that was part of the journey for me. But then I thought to myself, okay, let me see if I launch a business. And so that's when my coaching practice came to play, which was, about 6 months into the first child. I said to myself, I was like, I really can't see myself doing nothing but, and again, everyone has a choice in this matter. And sometimes people don't, like my mom didn't. She was a single mom. She had to work. But, I can't see myself only thinking about my son. I felt like the former me would have had to have been almost amputated. And I know that sounds gross and that sounds so harsh, but honestly, that is the word that came to mind when I thought about who I would be if I let go of everything that I was. And the same is true in the opposite direction. So my first sale, I had gone to Midtown, met my prospective client. This was before I was coaching mom founders. He was an investment banker, aspiring investment banker. And I brought my baby on my chest on a carrier to this Lip Teen in Midtown. And literally, my baby had a diaper blowout during that sales conversation. So, again, work life integration in the moment, I had to figure out how to fix that. But then I also closed the sale. And so I thought to myself, well, if I didn't go to this sales conversation with my baby on me, that would have made me feel like I was missing something. So I couldn't pretend in that moment at that age, 6 months and nursing him, for me personally, I couldn't pretend I wasn't a mom. And frankly, I didn't want to. How
Right.
about that? Like, that
Right.
should be suffice, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
That
100%.
should be suffice.
Right.
And yeah, so, closed the sale and launched the business. And after that, of course, I thought I was going to have a second singleton child. And I say that word because anyone that has multiples knows what that word means. That means, no, I had multiples. So I was so blessed, though. So blessed. Again, my plan, just thinking very white picket fence, was, oh, have 2 children, right? That was my plan. And then I learned I had identical twins. And when I learned that, I was so deathly afraid because, twins don't run in my family. Not that you would know that, but they don't. And identical twins is a very different scenario. And so there's a lot that it's kind of magic in a way. And so that was magical, but very frightening because I felt very, very vulnerable to the healthcare system. And I'm sure, Michelle, as you know, in your work and with a lot of the moms that I've supported, you might have a lot going on at work, but if you have a child, for example, that has different needs, my goodness, the healthcare system doesn't make it easy on you.
No, not
And
at all. Yeah.
not at all. It's almost like on purpose
Right.
complicated,
Yes.
right? It's like,
Yeah.
try to get that deducted or whatever, right? But
It's like, not
same
only have we put this on you, that you have these extra like issues to deal with and you're dealing with that, but now let's make it more complicated, like on top
for
of it.
funsies. Yeah,
Yeah.
for funsies. So At that time, I would say I was just very, very scared, and there was a lot of fear mongering, I'll be very honest, in terms of the different doctors and like, oh, you might want to have your own sort of birth plan, but guess what? No, it's going to be what we want. And so I had to really, for myself, almost bring back that brave little girl that I was before, having been raised in my scenario, in that moment to basically almost fight for what I wanted and I needed in terms of
Mm.
my children and then my older one. And with my business, it was on life support.
Mhm.
When it comes to motherhood as well as business, there are seasons, and we talked about that in the
Right, right.
coaching program. I can't go full force when I have twins inside me and I'm vomiting all over the place, frankly. That was extra nausea, let me just
Yeah.
say. I also at the tail end, I had to go to the doctor very frequently, all the time. And it was so obnoxious, but I mean, have to do what you got to do. And it was more frightening than anything else. So I couldn't have, client conversations in the same way as when I had one child.
Mhm.
But I had to keep adjusting the way that I would do business, and I would have to adjust whether or not I was, all in pertaining to business. And
Mhm.
so, that's a lot of what I tell a lot of people, and it's a lot of why I'm honest when I'm coaching. Like, I'm not going to be like, "Oh yeah, let's pretend you could go to like a retreat in Vermont for a month and not feed your family so you could write a book."
Right.
Right? Or so you could go and create the gala that, I know that you have a gala with your nonprofit. Like, there's things that have to be done, in front of our kids. And I think there's beauty there. And I don't think it's spoken of enough.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I totally agree. And I was actually, we had this coming up, but I also was thinking of you because recently I was doing some work and my son asked my husband, like, oh, can mommy complain? He was like, well, she's doing some work right now, but later. And then he said, I want a job with work. And so I
Oh,
told him he was the director of Hugs. And so, it was just really funny how I did this. And I know we talked about those kinds of things of like, how do we incorporate our kids into our work? It's just one of those aha moments of like, my son now at 4 was like, I want to work for it. Just that kind of interest in that is, I think is so invaluable, right? And I had this, now when I look back too, I had this as a kid. My mom was a teacher, and
mm,
so we would go and like set up her classroom with her, right? And um that was all, part of being hands-on. We sometimes were grading papers for her. All the things that teachers have to do that like we could do some of it. And so, just trying to keep that in mind and remind myself of that. And a lot of really cool things came out of that, and yeah, so I think that's one thing I always really love about what you are saying is not denying it and including it. Yeah, and I love the fact that you took your baby to a sales call, and then, dealt with that. We had a COVID baby, but he was often, right beside me when I was on calls and sometimes in the picture and those kinds of things. And I'm not going to deny that that's, what I am and that, it took a long time for me to get to this stage. And so, yeah, I think that's really great. Um, what would you tell, a new mom who is starting out, business, nonprofit, whatever, venture that they're starting on? What would be the like one piece of advice you would give them?
stay connected. That's the number one piece of advice. So when I had my firstborn, I felt that desire in my heart to stay connected with the world of commerce, with the industry, whether it was advertising or big brands, former employers. And it wasn't so much because my intention was, okay, I'm definitely going to go back into advertising and work here or there. It wasn't that. But what I knew, being raised by a single mom, was that what if I needed to go back, right? I didn't want to feel like a fish out of water. I didn't want to be irrelevant. And
Mhm.
I didn't want to have to reintroduce myself either. Granted, I'm not Jay-Z and I know that's from that song, but
Mhm.
like I wanted to just always have a presence amongst people that if I needed to go back because my family needed it, that I could go back and have confidence. What
Mhm.
I have realized, a lot of moms, because the intention of going back might not be there, or
Mhm.
the intention of going back might not have a timeline. So you might not be saying to yourself, oh, I need to go back into the world of work, in 2025, because those things were not present for them. A lot of them decided to totally opt out and not at all maintain some sort of presence, whether it was on LinkedIn, whether it was on, some other professional platform, whatever that might be for your specific industry. So that's the number one piece of advice I would say. And I live it and I breathe it and I mean it. And I would tell any human on this planet, if they say, your network is like your net wealth or worth or whatever, right? The people that play such they're very valuable in the sense that not just you getting value from them, but you also giving value to them, which we talked about in the group program. Then I would say, even if you don't have a time frame as a mom, a new mom, even if you don't have the energy as a mom or new mom, you must do your best to stay present in the world of commerce. And it does not mean that you have to open up an LLC like I did in that year. It only means that you need to have a conversation with people who have access to resources.
Mhm.
Why might that be important? Not just for you as a mom. For me, the reason why I really believe in moms staying connected in the world of commerce is not just because a mom needs employment or needs to sell something. It is also because, and my podcast is this for me, it's an opportunity that if your child says, Mommy, I have a business idea of this new kind of like bifocals or whatever, that you can then have the guts and connections to say, I know someone that works at Warby Parker, and let me introduce my child to that person. Does that mean that you needed to have worked for Warby Parker? Not at all. But if you have that relationship, we can help our children fulfill their dreams faster if we stay connected and in the mix of what's going on. So my podcast, it's like my treasure trove for my children. Any idea they have, I have a relationship that I can quickly, invite them to be a part of. And obviously, they own the conversation because I'm not like that. It's not like, oh, yeah, and I'll do everything for you. But I'm also training them as well. I'm training
Mhm.
them to use their voice. I'm training them to talk to strangers. These are things that are part of how I have integrated my work and my life, and why my group coaching program includes that concept that they get to be part of your business experience. And it's not only if you have a business related to moms,
Right.
like you could have a business related to anything and your kids have that front row seat. Why not give them a good show and let them be
Mhm.
part of the show too?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's absolutely great. And I do love that. And I think, you know, staying connected, having the network, you also never know where that's going to, pay off. And so I will say, donors and connectors that I have found that I would not have expected from my network, but just people I have, kept in touch with, just kept, being in their world. And so, they'll see things I'm doing. And so I think that that's so huge, is just to keep the network going for so many reasons. And I think to take away the loneliness, when you're doing your own thing, it can get very lonely. To have people that you can rely on and go to, I think is really also very important as well. Um, so I want to talk about, because I think one of your big things, first of all, your book, which is incredible, but also that you do in your coaching, and that I see on your podcast as well, is really talking about that fertile imagination and using that imagination piece. And I just want to talk a little bit about, I know you've incorporated that and and talked about how you incorporate that with kids and work. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about what that means and what that looks like.
Yeah, and I think anybody that's a new mom or anyone that has even experienced like a really tumultuous experience, right, on their path to motherhood can relate to this concept. There's for me, there came a moment when I had my twins and now I was a mother of three where I felt like I was very empty. Like there was no like spark inside of me. And I went back to the time when I was a little girl, and I would often, right before I would fall asleep, have these like visions. Like we're talking about like I was able to be like Simone Biles, triple triple jumping on that thingamajig because I'm not a gymnast, but I think people get the whole idea. So I would have these visions of me doing amazing things. My imagination was very active as a little girl right before I went to bed. So what's the first thing? Well, maybe the second, because for me, it was a little bit of my tummy and my body that kind of went away. But the second thing that we lose oftentimes when we do become parents is sleep. And so that meant that I would no longer access my imagination. And it got me very depressed, to be
Mhm.
honest. And I know the difference between like clinical depression and depression. This was not clinical because my mom has manic depression. But what it was that it just would take me a lot longer to like laugh, and feel joy and want to like dance to like, I don't know, a Madonna song or something. And so that meant for me that something was missing. What it turned out to be was my imagination. And so that was part of the inspiration of my book. I said, you know what? Something is missing. I want to find it because that is the source of excitement for me when it comes to things of my business, when it comes to even like having fun with my child, when it comes to feeling like I'm lit up like a Christmas tree. And so, in Fertile Imagination, the book that I wrote last year, what I decided to do was really figure out okay, let's say you're a mom and you're not feeling as like thrilled with life, or you're not feeling like the enthusiasm that you once had, right? And again, it could be lack of sleep or a lot of things. It could be, postpartum depression, whatever it might be for you. What might be the first step? And so there's three steps if you want to, have this fertile imagination, which is the following. Let me define it. A fertile imagination is the ability to do something or see something and make it real that you may have never seen another mom do in your life, right? It could be your own mom, it could be your grandmother. I know for you, you have Cece, I think was your grandmother, right?
Yes, yeah.
Right. It could
Mhm.
be your girlfriends around you that are moms. And so the way to wake up your imagination is really about setting the conditions so that your imagination knows that you'll listen to it, right? So we start out with reawakening your imagination, and when you reawaken your imagination, that might include some moments of stillness, right? So we did some meditation, for example, in the group coaching program. Or it might mean playing with your child, like going to a museum with your child and letting yourself get lost in the artsy fartsy stuff, right?
Mhm.
Or it could be singing Britney songs if you're like, a singer at heart. Whatever it is, we need to figure out how to wake up your imagination so that you can start using it, right? And once you wake it up, that is also when you start feeling lit up inside, right? So you might feel like you're in a rut now, but if you go and you do some of these things, these are different tools that we would use to reawaken our imagination. You'd get back up and you'd have access to more expansive thinking, right? So it's kind of like, all right, how am I going to integrate my children into my business? How am I going to get, my next donor for my nonprofit? Or how am I going to launch this marketing campaign? So we got to wake up your imagination for these better ideas, these unlock the fresh thinking. Then it's a matter of playing with our imagination, because the imagination, we had it as a kid, right? And so we often played with it. So we entertained it. We took it seriously. We didn't say, no, be quiet. I'm not interested in what you got to say. Or like, you're not realistic. No, you have to play with it. And this is something that even if you work in a very old fashioned business like manufacturing, you can do this too. So Beth Comstock, one of the world's greatest, CMOs of GE, used this idea of being playful. So she would actually go to a, Korea pop concert in Korea and actually bring some of the insights that she got back to GE and apply it to maybe their customer experience journey. It might feel far out, but this is what it takes to actually distinguish yourself in the market, right? And all of these things you could teach your kids, which is part of the process. But then on top of that, after that, then you stretch your imagination. And that's where, really being in collaboration with someone is important, because stretching your imagination, you could only stretch your imagination so far on your own. You really need the help of other people. And so this could be someone in your own home, like a personal fan. It could be a co-founder, right, of your nonprofit or an organization, or it could be a complete stranger. So on my podcast, for example, and I actually have a networking playbook where I could teach you, if you're a business owner, how to like stretch your imagination in this way, talk to strangers. But my podcast is a collection of strangers that I decided I wanted to bring on my platform to give wisdom to moms that are launching businesses and they want to not lose sight of what's important to them,
Mhm.
i.e., their kids, i.e., their mission, and also your health, because that is something that cannot be sacrificed. All of that to say, in the playbook, which if you go to fertileideas.com, you could get it for free. I literally tell you how you, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert or an ambivert, how you can approach anyone. And by approaching someone, whatever idea you had that came from your imagination, they can amplify that idea. They could make it bigger, better, badder. They could share, your message with someone in another country. I mean, this is about taking that idea, playing with the idea, and then having other people almost like play with you metaphorically.
Mhm.
And so a lot of that boils down to talking to strangers who can help you take your idea further. And as a mom, and I say this again, in my book, Fertile Imagination, that book is not so much like, okay, and you must have a business to read this book. That book is about, it starts with rewriting the script that you want to play out for your life as a mom. And by that very idea, that might then start, that might get you to think, well, how might I rewrite my professional script, right? Like
Right.
launch a business, or how might I rewrite the script that I've written for myself in partnership with, my husband, my wife, or my friend, or whatever, a co-parent. So there's a lot of like ways that you can use your imagination, your fertile imagination, so that you actually get the most out of life and your kids get to see you do this, right? We're showing them what's possible, and saying things, maybe I'm doing it wrong, but if I just tell my kids things, like they don't do it.
Mhm.
Gosh, I wish that were the case. But I'm banking on the fact that if they see me do something, that they'll copy me. Maybe not
Right.
today, but maybe tomorrow.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And I love the whole, talking about imagination and talking about rewriting the script, because I think, the other thing that comes with it is, right, as children, we're kind of encouraged to imagine. And then we get to a certain point when it's like, oh, you can't think that way, or you can't do that, or, all of that. And I think it beats on the imagination, but it also then, yeah, it starts writing the script for you that maybe works, maybe doesn't, or it worked for, kind of a season and now it doesn't work anymore. And I think that that's so important, right? And we're all changed by becoming parents, and we're all changed by experiences. Somehow I hit the mute button. But I think that's all really important, to realize, is that, there is that, rewriting of scripts and that being told, like, follow this particular, journey, and that might work for you and it might not. And I think really allowing that to do that, and to do it. And I think, tackling the big word, imagination, right? Like that's a big word and that feels very childish in a lot of ways. But it's not. And it doesn't have to be the same thing of like, imagining, playing, tops and rubbers or whatever it was that we played as kids. It doesn't have to be that. It can really just be dialing into, that part of you that has those and not being afraid to acknowledge what you want to do and then work on how to get there.
Yeah. And I think, when it comes to using your imagination, it's unlimited in the way that you apply your imagination. So, in the beginning of the group coaching program, we think about your company vision, right? Now, in a boring world where you don't have a child who's like, I don't know, looking at his Pokemon trading cards or like figurines or children's book, in a boring world, you think, oh, company vision, like how can you really apply your imagination there, right? But it's endless, right? So it's about thinking big, thinking maybe a little bit outrageously, but
Mhm.
being bold. And aren't we as humans drawn to people who are bold,
Right.
people who are like, I represent hope, I represent the rights of women? It's like we're drawn to these people, we
Mhm.
vote for these people, we buy from these people. And you know what? Somebody had to use their imagination to come up with that messaging,
Mhm.
and it works for us on a very emotional level, which is why once you learn how to tap into your imagination as a business owner with children, then you will just be way happier. And you're like the barometer in your home, right? So if a mom is happy, overjoyed, dancing and singing at the top of her lungs, chances are the kids will be that way too, the partner will be that way too, and the mood of the home just changes once an adult is in that playful place. The mood
Mhm.
just changes, things are
Right.
just way more fun.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely, for sure. Yeah. And I think, you know, that's something that's difficult for a lot of us to achieve, right? Instead of thinking of like the to-do list and all this stuff, um, is to just sort of let it be in the moment and to do that. And I think it's definitely something I have struggled with. And I think, my son is very good at teaching me this of like, okay, it's okay in the moment to just have fun and be a little nutty um, and that's okay, so I think that's really great to do it. What drives you? What motivates you? I mean, this is a lot of stuff you're talking about. There's a lot of stuff that you do. What is it that drives you?
I think, when I was younger, I was always hearing people say, oh, my aunt, she's an opera singer, or oh, my cousin, he's the mayor of, I don't know, some town in New Jersey or whatever it was. And I didn't have anyone to say, I didn't have anyone to speak of in my family. Like I didn't feel like we did anything that was like worthy of like showing off, or did anything that was like amazing. A lot of what I was around were people that were really surviving, just very much so surviving. And a lot of them were grasping on to life,
Mm.
and for me what really drives me is, um first I'd want to be that aunt to like my nephews and nieces. It's like, holy cow, Aunt Melissa's doing this. What does that mean? That means that maybe I can do that too. But then on top of that, for my children, it's kind of like, what? It's no excuses for them, right? So if mommy can do this with you on, my chest having a blowout and I still get the sale, then you have no excuses for me when you grow
Mhm.
up and you're not able to talk to a stranger and sell your solution.
Right.
So for me it's about really showing my kids what is possible when you take fear and you say, you know what, I might feel like an imposter, but I'm going to do it anyway, and here's a strategy I'm going to use to like get over that hump, and we'll see what happens on the other side. So
Mhm.
for me it's like I want to be an example to people that come behind me of what's possible, and also the fact that you can fall a lot of times but you could get up a lot more, right? So like if someone, if I fell for whatever reason in my business or even as a mom, which a lot of times people don't speak about that, but sometimes you feel like a failure sometimes as a
Right.
mom too. It's possible to, get up the next day and try your best and be good at it. And so
Mm,
seeing that you can be not unscathed, but seeing that you can get back up is also important for me to show my children and people around me.
mhm.
Um, I don't want them to stay down at any point in their lives.
No. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's really true. And I think one of the things that I I have always loved about you is like ultimately, and you may not say this, but it's a lot about like getting out of your own way, right? And so sort of just saying I'm gonna do this. I remember telling people, so recovering attorney over here. But when I was practicing law after a couple of years, telling your attorneys, like, if you mess up, the world is not going to open up and swallow you whole. Like, it's going to be okay. And that was something I really truly believed. And so I had to take that into, other firms when I wasn't doing that anymore and say like, yeah, I'm going to make mistakes and that's okay. And I think that that's something really important. So any, so I have one more question for you. But anything that you would like to share, I will share links to all of your stuff. But anything in particular, offers, that kind of thing that you have.
Sure. So, really depending on when someone sees this, but just definitely follow me on Instagram. And so that'll be very simple. If this is on Instagram at Melissa Llarena, go to fertileideas.com. When I say that the one thing I would tell any mom is to stay connected, I want to be sure that you have the tools you need so that this way you can actually do the steps of connecting with people. So grab the playbook that I have, a networking playbook on fertileideas.com. And from that point, I will share with you any other updates I might have because I am doing a masterclass September 23rd. And so I will be sharing that news on Instagram. But get the playbook. That's step one. And I encourage you to reach out to one person out of this conversation, realizing the fact that you might not need them as much as they might need you. And
Mhm.
that's another way of thinking about networking too.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So this is the question I've been asking everybody is, what is your definition of rockstar parent or kick-ass parent or whatever you want to say? Um, what's kind of your definition?
It's so funny 'cause I'm thinking about Steve Tyler and Aerosmith, but I don't think that necessarily qualifies. What I would say rockstar parent is it's like you're the rock. You are the rock, of your home. You're that steady, reliable human to your children. They can ask you anything and they can feel open enough to share the good and the bad, but you'll always be there. So for me, I think about being a rock star parent in the sense that you're the rock.
Mhm.
You're your kids' rock.
Right. Yeah, I love that. So I just want to thank you so much for joining us and for sharing, just a little bit about all the things you're doing and all the awesome things you're doing. So thank you so much.
Thank
If
you.
you know anybody yourself, please nominate yourself, or somebody else that would be somebody else we could highlight. Please send them our way. We would love to include them as well. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you.